So, as everyone knows, we had some pretty big primaries that occurred a couple days ago in places like Oklahoma, Alabama, and Georgia. We're not talking about just random primaries with no real impact. No, these are some of the biggest primaries that have occurred all year. And I think it's time we delve into what happened. Was it a good night for the GOP? Was it bad? And I know I'm a little bit late to the party. I was planning on this video coming out yesterday, but we all know what happened. The Iran stuff got finalized. So yeah, this got pushed back a day, but I don't think it's the end of the world. So yeah, sorry for it being late, but either way, we got to delve into what happened on Tuesday night because, like I just said, we're not talking about some random primary that nobody voted in and nobody cares about. No, we're talking about Georgia, one of the most important swing states, especially for 2026. They had a huge primary for both the Senate and the governorship. But before we delve into Georgia, I want to talk more about Alabama and Oklahoma first because yes, everyone's talking about Georgia for obvious reasons. This was a runoff. This is for the most important state, or not the most important, but for sure a top 5 battleground state for 2026. I want to start with Alabama because there was a very competitive primary for the Senate seat. But if I'm being completely honest here, despite how much people are trying to hype up this race as this down the wire, within 5 votes affair, it was not really that close. Barry Moore, he won by over 10 points. Yes, it's closer than it should have been. Barry Moore was the Trump endorsed candidate. He should have won this race by a lot more. That I don't know why he didn't win by a landslide, but he still won by over 10 points. It really wasn't as close as some people are claiming. They're making it sound like it's be down the wire. It's going to be within a couple hundred votes. Jared Hudson's going to win. And by the way, this actually was a race where both candidates were not actually bad. In fact, they were kind of good, especially Barry Moore. Jared Hudson, he sounds good on the issues, but let's be honest here. Barry Moore has an actual record. You know what he did in the House. You know he has a real record. You know what he's going to do on immigration and these other issues. Yes, Jared Hudson, he said a lot of good stuff. But at the same time, some of the people backing him were kind of sketchy. It's not like he was gonna be awful or whatever, but still, Jared Hudson, he would have been fine, I think. In fact, in some issues, he might have actually been good on stuff like immigration. But honestly, you don't want to risk it, especially with it being 6-year terms. Just go with Barry Moore. Barry Moore already is great on the issues, and you already know Barry Moore is a very conservative congressman. It's not like you don't know for sure, like Hudson. You know that, hey, Barry Moore, he's great on immigration. He's great on all these other issues. So it was a big W for Alabama, a great replacement for Tuberville. You could argue this is a slight upgrade. Oh, that's pretty good, actually, because Tuberville already is a top tier senator. And you go from somebody that's like an A tier guy to potentially S tier. Somehow we're improving our delegation, even in a place like Alabama, which already has good senators. Tuberville's great, and Katie Britt's okay. She's not the best, but still, these are good options out of Alabama. Far better than states like Arkansas or Mississippi. Way better. So Alabama, they did the right thing, and we got Senator Barry Moore. Next up is Oklahoma, and before we get into the big race that everyone's talking about, we got to quickly mention the fact that Kevin Hern, he's officially the Republican nominee for the Senate. And this is another huge upgrade. Markwayne Mullin, he's not as bad as like Langford or whatever, but let's be honest here. He just wasn't a great senator. Now, he's been great at DHS. Like, yeah, he's been great at that spot. But as a senator, Markwayne Mullin never really was the best pick, especially for Oklahoma. Like, seriously, that's your best person for Oklahoma? No. And when he dropped out, Kevin Hern immediately jumped in and everybody backed him. And of course, he won his primary quite easily. And that's another big upgrade. You go from a whatever senator that has some issues to, oh, a very good congressman. That is a huge upgrade, even in Oklahoma, which again, we're not talking about an F tier guy. We're talking about below average, maybe, but far better than Langford or McConnell or Tillis or Thune. You go from that to Kevin Hearn, who is a good congressman. He's not S tier, but he is another upgrade. So this is the story of 2026. Across the board in these primaries, we're seeing Republicans improve their Senate delegation significantly. No more Mitch McConnell's, no more Bill Cassidy's, John Cornyn's. These people are gone. And in most of these races, we're getting real upgrades, like in Oklahoma, like in Texas, even freaking Alabama. You go from Tuberville, a top tier senator, to somebody that's even better on the issues. So, yeah, it was a pretty big victory in Oklahoma. It was not a surprise at all. Everybody knew that this was going to be a Kevin Hearn victory. It was a matter as to what margin of victory does he get. And well, he nearly got 70% of the vote. But that's not the primary that everyone's talking about. Everyone is talking about the governor primary. And I would say this is one of the few L's of last night, or I should say Tuesday night, because it's looking like Drummond's going to win. And for those that live under a rock and don't know who this guy is, you can make a strong argument that Drummond is one of, if not the worst attorney generals in any red state. I'm not even exaggerating. This guy sucks. You have good options like Ken Paxton in Texas, and then you have the polar opposite in Drummond. I have no clue how this guy ever became the AG, but for those that want to know why he sucks, look up what he's doing to Catholic schools in Oklahoma. You just can't make this up. This is the conservative in Oklahoma. We're not talking about Vermont or some deeply Democrat state. This is one of the most conservative states in the country. And he's going after Catholic schools because of principles and this other nonsense. It is insane what he's doing there. But somehow he barely took first place. Thankfully, there is a runoff in place. So there is a chance to beat this guy, but I have this sick feeling he's going to win. Like, I don't want him to because he's awful, but I just think he's going to win because of name recognition. And I know Trump is backing Mazzei, but honestly, he's not really campaigning that much. And that is a concern we'll get to in Georgia. But in Oklahoma, I think Drummond's going to win. I hope he loses somehow because he is just awful. But even then, Mike Mazzei is not the greatest either. Like, yeah, he's better than Drummond, but still, this is Oklahoma. There should be better picks than one of the worst AGs and kind of a mediocre Republican that's not good. But that's what's going on in Oklahoma. I do hope that Drummond somehow loses. Again, look it up. Look up what this guy does as the AG. It is insane. This is the type of stuff you see in California, where California Democrats, they target religious schools because of principles and this other BS. It is incredible that he might actually win. But in large part, that's because there's so much vote splitting here. And with him having universal name ID, it might actually be enough for him to win. I hope Trump realizes this is awful and tries a campaign here, but I don't think he's going to. So Oklahoma's governorship, really in kind of an L. It is to be determined, but I'm leaning towards it being an L for the GOP. I'm hoping Drummond loses. Even then, Mike Mazzei's not the greatest. So yeah, kind of an L in Oklahoma. And finally, Georgia. This is the state that everyone's talking about, and for good reason. This is one of the most important swing states for 2026, and of course for 2028. As everyone's talking about the Senate race, and can Republicans beat Jon Ossoff? And everyone knows my opinion. I think Ossoff, he is a strong candidate. I think he is going to win, but people are making it sound like he is this unstoppable electoral juggernaut he's going to win by 50 points. I guess he could, maybe. But guys, he's not as strong as some people suggest. In fact, the polling right now, he's kind of struggling. Yeah, he's leading, but for being this allegedly strong candidate, he's barely polling above like 45%. In some polls, he's above 50, but it's not this historic victory and lead that some people claim it's going to be. So yeah, it is a race that Republicans I think are going to lose, but Ossoff is beatable. It's not like he's this unbeatable electoral juggernaut. He's been there for 50 years. No, he's been there for one term. And you could argue he only won in 2020 because of like 50 different flukes happening at once. He barely made the runoff. If it wasn't for that, he would have never won. And what happened during the runoff, Warnock carried him. Warnock easily won, and that's what actually occurred in Georgia. But either way, that's not really the point of the discussion here. It's about the Republican primary because Mike Collins won. He won by over 10 points, and I'm not surprised by this at all. Trump at the last second finally endorsed him. It gave him a big bump on election day. I'm not even exaggerating. The early vote, it was leaning towards Dooley, but the election day vote, it swung like 35, 40 points in some areas. It was insane what happened. But Mike Collins won, and Brian Kemp suffered not one, but two embarrassments. And we'll get to the second one in a second. But this one here is just baffling. I still don't get what Brian Kemp was thinking here. If you wanted to get influence in the Senate, why don't you just run for the Senate? Why? Like we said a million times before, if Brian Kemp had half of a brain, it did not hate Trump, he would have ran for the seat and he would have easily won. He would have had an uncontested primary and he would have easily beaten Jon Ossoff. But for whatever reason, he did not want to run, yet he wanted to spite Trump and try to run his own candidate because apparently he wants to run for president and thinks, oh, if I could show that I have all this influence against Trump, I can win the nomination in 28. It's delusional, but that's the rumor. And he went with Derek Dooley, who, again, I don't get why go with Dooley. There's a million different people you could go with, and instead you go for the football coach, not for Georgia, mind you, but for Tennessee. Seriously, because his dad's a legend? Who cares? Like, this whole thing made no sense from the get-go, and it failed miserably. Mike Collins won by a big margin. And if Trump endorsed him earlier and actually campaigned for him, Mike Collins would have won by over 30. I really believe that. If this was more pronounced of an endorsement, Mike Collins would have easily cruised to a huge victory. But he still won, and of course, he ran it up in the rural parts of the state. And Derek Dooley, he did fine in the Atlanta metro, but even then, some of the performances for Dooley in the suburbs weren't that good. Like, look at Cobb County. This should be a county he wins by 30 points in. He won by 5. Douglas 4. Even Fulton, he won by only 18. The performances here are bad. And even where Athens is, Clark County, he only won by 20. Even though this should be his best county because the football stuff, allegedly, he barely won it by 20 points. That's not even his best county. It is insane how pathetic he did in this part of the state. That's why he lost. But it's not all good news out of Georgia. In fact, there was one major L that did occur on Tuesday. It was the governor race. This is a disaster. It is absolutely pathetic that somebody like Rick Jackson could just buy his way to a nomination. Seriously, that's all he did here. He spent like $100 million on this race, and he barely won by 5. He flooded the airwaves just enough to convince enough normies that he was the Trump-backed candidate, that everybody loves him, Trump is going to campaign for him. He bullshitted people enough to the point where he won. And Rick Jackson sucks. He is awful. He has some very sketchy connections. The only thing he has going for him is money. I think he's going to win the governorship this fall, but you had Burt Jones, who was a lieutenant governor. He won statewide before. I know that was with Brian Kemp, but still, Burt Jones, I think, would have just been fine. He would have won. But instead, we got stuck with Rick Jackson in large part because Burt Jones really failed in the rural parts of the state. I have no clue what happened here, but some of these counties, he should have won by 40 points in. Compare some of these counties like Mitchell County. Burt Jones won it by 12. The same county, Mike Collins won it by 36. Place like Grady County, Jones plus 12, right here. Collins plus 40. This right here is why Burt Jones lost. Burt Jones simply failed to get the rural vote out to vote for him. If he did, he would have won because he did damn good in Cobb County. He only lost it by 12. Even Fulton, it was only Jackson plus 20. Like the Atlanta area was not as good for Rick Jackson as people thought, but he did just good enough in the rural parts of the state to win. He did just enough bullshitting to barely pull it off. The fact he spent this much money to barely win is pathetic. But it was the only way to beat the Trump endorsed candidate. So yeah, Rick Jackson, he won. He's going to be the GOP nominee. I hope he wins, though. Based on the guy's track record, he is going to be bad as a governor. I really think he's not going to be good whatsoever. The only thing he has going for him is money. But really, the only reason Jackson won and Mike Collins didn't win by a larger margin is, in my opinion, because Trump, for whatever reason, he is not really doing much for 2026. I know he's doing some campaign events here and there. I know it was the Freedom 250 stuff. I get that. But he should have done like one or two rallies for Burt Jones and Mike Collins in the last week. If he would have, that could have been the difference, especially for Burt Jones, and Mike Collins could have won by over 60. But for some reason, Trump has been kind of inactive this year. Same thing in Oklahoma. He did not do any events really, kind of out of nowhere endorsed Maze, but even then, it was one endorsement. Point is, I think Trump's biggest problem right now, he has to do more campaigning. Like, he still has a lot of influence, but some of these races, like in Oklahoma, like even in Georgia, because Georgia's a state that they don't really like Trump, especially the state GOP. Like, you have to actively campaign against these people. You can't just say, I endorse X, and that's that. That works in places like Alabama and these other states, but not so much in Georgia. So that is one takeaway from all of this. It was not a perfect night. It was okay. But I hope Trump realizes, oh, I actually have to campaign more because I want people like Burt Jones, not Rick Jackson, to win. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.